Okay, so Justin, thank you for doing this. So we're using your chapter in Sick of the System, the chapter that you wrote with Robert Maynard. Tell us a little bit more about like what informed that chapter and why you wrote it and what's important about that chapter.
Well, I think one of the things that we were seeing in terms of the decarceration that was happening in response to the COVID-19 crisis was that most of the people that were being released because they were seen as having engaged in non-violent or non-serious kinds of acts that have either had them charged and awaiting trial
Yes,
or convicted serving shorter sentences. And so there was, a lot of people that are being released, but at the same time, many people who weren't, by virtue of what had landed them there, or what they've been accused of landing them there. So, we are not, as human beings, our worst actions. We are not. Inherently bad. We are not always who we were in a given moment where we've perhaps transgressed or harmed others.
of
And
course.
so that's kind of what was behind that chapter, really, was like, okay, there's a lot of people being left behind here, a lot of people that are being exposed to the potential of contracting this disease and potentially even losing their lives. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, um, that's kind of what was motivating us to push the boundaries of what could be seen as being acceptable in terms of bringing people back into the community or diverting them from custody, and challenging dangerousness, because really there's a lot of dangerous people that are never criminalized, that are dealt with in other ways, uh, you know at the top echelons of power, for
Of
instance.
course,
um,
yes.
so, why are we condemning uh, people to disease and death potentially? So that was what was behind that chapter.
And maybe update us a bit. So people have been released during COVID, and what are some of the numbers that we see now in terms of the release because of COVID and the danger to them in prison and in the danger of contracting COVID.
So initially, when the pandemic began, there were significant outbreaks in many jails and prisons across the country. For instance, your students would be familiar with the major outbreak that happened at Mission Institution, a federal penitentiary where people serve sentences of 2 years plus a day. People who, the Minister of Public Safety said had to be behind bars in the name of public safety. People who
Sure.
are experiencing more lockdowns, more segregation, have been stripped of programming, stripped of visits, at least up until this point where we're talking.
Mhm.
Um, you know, um, People who are experiencing state violence in a more profound way in the name of public health. And, how does that contribute to our safety in the long term when most of those folks eventually return to our communities
Yeah.
having been damaged by those practices? So that's one thing that's going on, is that some jurisdictions are keeping more people behind bars, and the federal government is one of them through the Correctional Service of Canada. And then you have other jurisdictions, um, like Ontario, even like Saskatchewan, releasing about 30% of their prisoners or diverting them from custody in different ways. Nova Scotia having almost uh, depopulated their system by almost 50%. So, like, some pretty significant things happening. But again, the people who are getting out, or who are being diverted from custody, tend to be those who either were accused or are serving sentences for things that the penal system considered to be not serious or non-violent. And there's a lot of folks who are languishing in these prisons, who are facing the prospect of getting COVID,
Yeah.
as well as these more austere conditions of confinement. So there's this like contradictory thing happening in many provincial territorial jurisdictions, where on the one hand they're diverting people from custody, more use of bail, they're using alternatives like temporary absences to decarcerate people who are in the system and getting them out.
Mhm.
Um, so that's progressive on the one hand, and then on the other hand you have like these draconian measures that are being done in the name of public health, like the lockdowns, like segregation,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
removal programs, the ending of visits, and so on and so forth, all being done in the name of disease prevention, that are like tremendously harmful, like,
No.
and that's being done also saying these people can't be let out because it threatens our safety. Well, exposing people to all this threatens our safety. And so Robin and I kind of are taking the position as abolitionists generally that we should be looking at alternatives
Yeah.
For imprisonment. But in this particular context, we have to be thinking about how can we build our communities, housing, addressing income insecurity, employment insecurity, mental health care, and healthcare access, improving that in a way that would actually strengthen our communities more than investing in cops, courts, and prisons. So that's kind of what's behind that chapter, is expanding who we think
Mhm.
is worthy of release and worthy of being given a chance, and building communities, not cages.
I like your word worthy, and that will, I think, be food for thought and debate in the class. Who is
Sure.
worthy? That's a good place to stop. And thank you so much, Justin. That's really clarifying, and I think it will be very helpful for students.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Eh?
Yeah. Take care.